Madam President,
The senator from New Jersey.
I rise today to discuss an issue that I believe should be discussed and worked on so much more in Congress, that demands an urgency of action, a dedication, and a focus to address our shortfalls as a nation to live up to our ideals, liberty and justice for all. What is written on the Supreme Court, a theme from our nation, equal justice under the law. It is the source of anguish that I believe is driving protests all over our country right now, from Ferguson to Staten Island, but even much more than that, from New Jersey to Oakland. Citizens of all races, of all backgrounds, Americans joining together to call for change, to have this idea that our legal system really should be a justice system. Now, this is an anguish that is not simply the result and the reaction to specific incidents. Yes, there is much discussion about those specific incidences in places like Staten Island, but it is a reflection of a deeper anguish and unfinished American business that has lasted for decades. I feel in my own personal life this sense of gratitude for my unique upbringing. As a young man in 1969, where my parents literally had to get a white couple to pose as them to buy the house I grew up in New Jersey, that literally had to go through the indignities of trying to break barriers of race to move into a town that was all white at the time. I stand here to tell you, I grew up in the greatest place. And the citizens of Harrington Park, New Jersey, are why I'm standing here right now. The love and the caring that exists in my state is remarkable. I also am here today because of a city that is a majority black city, Newark, New Jersey, that embraced me as a young professional, where I eventually became mayor. But my unique position, I have to say, has understanding all quarters of this country in an intimate way. I see this anguish that I speak of on so many of my friends and colleagues. I've heard it here in the Senate, from security guards pulling me aside to talk to me about their anguish and frustrations about the criminal justice system, from people who do the work in this body, cleaning our floors or tending to the needs of our senators, who feel this frustration about an American legal system that is falling short of American ideals, that is not a justice system. I saw it with my own parents who, with agony and pain, talk to me about not having a margin of error when it comes to dealing with police officers, who would coach me on how I should speak and talk, what I should do with my hands, because of the fears they had of the treatment that I might have that would be different than other Americans. I want you to know that I stand today because this cannot simply be reduced to a racial issue. This is the larger questions of justice in our country. This calls to the consciousness of all Americans. And it is sourced by the realities we face in this country, where we lead the globe in areas that no American who believes in freedom and liberty should want to lead. We have had, over the last decades of my lifetime, an explosion in incarceration that belies the truth of who we are. This nation has seen this country have an 800% increase in the federal prison population over the last 30 years. Think about that, an 800% increase. We now have the very ignominious distinction on the globe for leading the planet Earth in a country that incarcerates its own citizens. In fact, America is just 5% of the globe's population, but we have 25% of the world's imprisoned people. And I tell you, that is not because Americans have a greater proclivity for criminality. It is because our legal system is not a justice system. This over-incarceration, this over-criminality anguishes this nation, aggravates divisions, undermines freedom and liberty, and costs taxpayers so much more money. It is an unnecessary burden and expense that is a self-inflicted wound in this nation that undermines our prosperity, undermines our success. We spend $250 billion a year locking people up, and the majority of those people are non-violent offenders. In fact, over the last decades, right now in America, there are more people in prison for drug offenses than all the people imprisoned in the 1970s. It is an extraordinary fact. And whether you are black or white, if you get arrested and charged with a felony crime for doing some things that the last 3 presidents of the United States admitted to doing, if you are arrested for that, tried and convicted, and I say tried because with hesitancy, because the majority of them are plea bargains, as the president knows, if you get convicted of that felony offense, for that nonviolent drug offense, the collateral consequences to your life are horrendous. We now live in a nation where the collateral consequences are profound. We now know that time behind bars, even for these nonviolent offenders, reduces people's hourly wages by 11%, their annual employment by 9 weeks, their annual earnings by 40%. It has a powerful economic impact. If a person's convicted for possession of controlled substances use, they become ineligible for so many benefits that we would often think that we would want these very people to have. They can't get federal education grants, like a Pell Grant. They can't get loans or work assistance. They become ineligible for business licenses, outrageously so. A person convicted of a felony will be denied public housing, even the ability to visit their family in public housing. They could be kicked out of their current housing arrangements. Former inmates can't get jobs, can't get shelter, can't get loans. They often feel that no option exists other than going back to that slippery slope towards more crime. And now that is for all the people within the criminal system. But what is anguishing so many is the clear and undeniable applications of this criminal justice system, of this legal system, the applications of this legal system in unequal ways to different portions of our population. In my life, I've seen that firsthand. How the usage of drugs in different communities, where there's no difference between blacks and whites, folks are treated differently based upon their race or their socioeconomic status. Let me be clear. These issues are American issues, not simply race issues. They affect us all because we are a nation with a profound declaration of independence, but the truth of our country speaks also to an interdependence. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I point out these facts to let you understand why we have to have such an urgency. African Americans and whites have no difference in drug usage whatsoever. But an African American who chooses to use marijuana is 3.7 times more likely to be arrested for that usage than someone who is white. In fact, between 2007 and 2009, drug sentences for African American men were 13.1% longer than those for white men. Usage has no difference, but arrest rates dramatically higher for African American men. In fact, for all crimes, when you start breaking the actual data down, you see patterns of discriminatory impact that are unacceptable in a nation this great. Even for police violence, we have to understand that nearly 2.5 times more whites are arrested than blacks for crimes that are violent and nonviolent. 2.5 times more arrests for whites and blacks, but somehow African Americans are 21 more times more likely to be shot dead by a police officer. This is data that should not shock us along racial lines, but shock us along American lines. We are the nation of liberty and justice for all. We are the country of equal protection under the law. African Americans make up just 13% of our population, but 40% of the prison population. In New Jersey, African Americans are 13.7% of New Jersey's population, but 62% of New Jersey's prison population. And much of that, as it clearly the data shows, has come about through the persecution of the American drug policy that is applied to different groups and different effects. And the reality for minorities is punishing. By the age of 23, 44% of Latino youth will be arrested. We know the sad reality today that 1 in 3 black males born in America today can be expected, if we make no changes, to be incarcerated at some point in their lives. 1 in every 87 white males, 1 in 87, 18 to 64, is incarcerated, while 1 in every 12 blacks are. Now, I've struggled with these issues my whole life. And as a mayor of a city, constantly working to fight to protect citizens, I know how complicated these problems can be. My police department ourselves, when we dug into the data, we saw that our practices had to be changed, that we had to find better ways of keeping our community safe, but we also knew something deeper. I'll never forget when I sat with the head of the FBI in Newark, and I asked him about the violent crime problem. How are we going to solve this problem? And he looked at me and he said, "You don't understand, Mayor. We, meaning law enforcement, is not going to solve this problem. What has to be done are changes greater than this." I've watched how young kids get arrested for breaking the law, for smoking marijuana, or for being caught with possession. Teenagers find themselves, because they had a marijuana on them of a certain amount and weight, so the charges increase, to being in a school zone, which is every place in many cities, now face mandatory minimums of upwards of 5 years. These teenagers scared, afraid, knowing that they broke the law, but other folks, like the last 3 presidents, have gotten away with it. And they get offered up by the prosecutor, overworked, trying hard to serve the public and keep people safe. That prosecutor doesn't give them the mandatory minimum, they give them a deal. Just take time served, or a month, or 6 months, but they find themselves with that felony conviction. And now they find themselves in a world where they think they have no options. They can't get jobs, they can't get education grants, they can't get hope. Hopelessness is a toxic state of being, and those kids then often get back caught up into that underground economy, back into that world of drugs. What we saw in my time as a mayor is that so many of the people who ultimately end up being violent criminals started as kids that felt all their options had closed in on them because they got caught up in this world of drugs. One of the worst collateral consequences of the way we are going about prosecuting our criminal legal system is the violence we're seeing from people who think they have no options but to do what they're doing. I say this all to simply say we must find a way out. If we are America, a system that believes in elevating human potential, believes in ideas of liberty and freedom, and deplores this concept that government should take people's liberty for no good means, we have to do something about this issue. We who believe in freedom, who tell the world to look at our light and our torch and our promise, we should evidence something better than leading the globe in incarcerating our own citizens. We, this country, where generation after generation have conquered discrimination against Irish, have conquered discrimination against Italians, have beat back discrimination against Catholics, have stood up to discrimination against Jews, have fought against Jim Crow and slavery, advancing not towards black ideals or Jewish ideals or Irish ideals, but the common ideals that bind us as brothers and sisters of justice, of freedom, of equality. We have to do better than lead the globe in incarceration, than have a legal system that subjects more of its people and minorities towards search and scrutiny and seizure and arrest. This we cannot tolerate. And why I stand so confidently with a faith in my nation that we can do better does not just stem from this hallowed history, it also stems from the present. Right now in America, there are states doing incredible things to change away this reality. I'm proud of my state. We've gone far, but not far enough. But in New Jersey, between 1999 and 2012, we reduced our prison population 26%. And guess what? During that same period of time, New Jersey saw a 30% reduction in violent crime. We showed to America that, hey, we are better than this. We can give more liberty to people, lowering our prison population, having a disproportionate effect on minorities, and actually drive down crime as well. We're not the only state. New York's prison population is down 24% from the late 1990s. And this is due almost entirely to reforms of the Rockefeller drug laws. Policies that sent thousands of people to prison, often serving sentences for low-level crimes. Over that same period, New York's reduced its crime by more than half, lowering prison populations, disproportionately affecting African Americans and Latinos, and lowering crime. Texas reduced its prison population in 2013 dramatically and has seen decreases in both crime and recidivism rates. All of these states can do more, but why has the federal government done little to nothing to follow suit? I'm proud of what's going on in the Senate with many of my colleagues. I came and joined this body when people pulled together to begin legislation like the Smarter Sentencing Act, or more recently the Redeem Act I did in partnership with Rand Paul. I'm so proud that this issue cuts across political sides, that we have Democrats and Republicans, red states and blue states, all beginning to say that we can do better. And I'm here today to end my remarks with that call to the consciousness of our country. If we have an injustice in our midst, with a legal system that is so far away from the justice system to which we should aspire, we have to do better. I was raised to believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The words of Langston Hughes, there's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. I know in my heart that with the anguish of millions of Americans being punished by a legal system that has gone way out of control, affecting blacks and whites, young people of all backgrounds, that a legal system that patently has a discriminatory impact on minorities, that a legal system that steals the people's liberty, that we can do better than this. We can save taxpayer money. We can lower our prison and incarceration rates. We can elevate the promise of so many now denied their promise. And we can celebrate our American ideals. We need to lead this globe, not in incarceration, but we need to lead this globe by telling the truth of who we are, that America is a land of freedom, of justice, where there truly is liberty and justice for all. Thank you.